Hello. So today I want to talk about a topic that kind of relates to a video that Millennial Woes put out recently. I think it was yesterday or the day before, about the difference between a concept of confidence for men versus women, and how confidence will sort of manifest itself or express itself differently in men than in women. And I thought that was a pretty interesting topic, and I do agree with most of what he said. Well, actually, all of what he said. I can't think of anything I disagreed with. But I wanted to speak on a similar subject. Maybe it's a little tangential, but this idea of complementary concepts for men and women, that a concept won't apply in the same way to men and women. Even if we can apply the same concept, it won't apply in the same manner to men and women. And one of these concepts, I think, is the heroic myth, the heroic archetype that people like Campbell and Jung, and now very popularly Dr. Peterson, and those guys pretty much exclusively talk about the male hero myth, which is interesting, of course. It's basically the skeletal structure of many of our favorite stories as a culture, as a people. And there, he talks about, obviously, the idea that the hero is a force for order, which extends itself into chaos in order to conquer the chaos in a way and extract something useful out of it, and then to return home and reestablish the order in a better way, in a new, refreshed way. And I think that this hero myth honestly comes from its farthest, most primeval origins of this idea of order descending into chaos and then being reborn and reestablished into a new order it has its roots in what the sun does in the farthest north regions. I say this laughing because it sounds a little ridiculous at first, but when you think about it in the most abstract way, how is it that so many different cultures had this similar heroic myth, and that the earliest version of this heroic myth was involving the sun, or some figure representing the sun, where it would go into the underworld and then be reborn. This is actually what happens in the far northern latitudes during the winter. The sun descends, so to speak, into the underworld. You can't see it. It's past the horizon. You go a few days in darkness, sometimes weeks, depending on how far north you are. And then the sun is reborn come spring, and a new year begins. But what is the female version of this? If that's the male version, what is the female version of this? The female version is essentially a mirror image to the male version. I just got a funny notification. Someone said that I looked like a typical beta leftist or beta liberal leftist or something like that. And I replied to him, "Come say it to my face." I was just joking, and I just got a comment on my phone. It popped up where he said, "LOL, I told you not to take it seriously." I didn't take it seriously. It was a joke, I know. Anyway, where was I? I get a lot of weird comments. Anyway, so order and chaos, right? Is that where I was? I'm gonna have to edit this out. Where the fuck was I? Right, so the female version of the heroic myth archetype is a mirror image of the male heroic archetype, whereas while the male goes out and starting with order, descending into chaos, conquering the chaos, and then reestablishing a better order, is the male archetype. The female is, I would say, the opposite, where instead of chaos being the thing that needs to be conquered, it is order which must be liberated from, which she wants to be liberated from, which people so it's the introduction of chaos. And so a good example of this would be Antigone. I think Antigone is the classic archetype of the female heroic myth, because the story of Antigone is that her brother dies, is killed in battle, and both of her brothers are killed in battle. One of them is buried and given honors, and the other one, the loser of the battle, well, the exile, these details really don't matter, is not allowed to be buried. And because her brother is not allowed to be buried by the new king, she sacrifices herself in the attempt of burying the brother. She's buried alive for trying to bury her brother. So this represents to me the overwhelming of order. It's order becoming tyrannical. It's too much order. It's an imbalance where order is arresting, and it's, what's the word? Out of proportion, maybe? So the female heroic archetype is, instead of establishing order, it's the introduction of chaos into an unhealthy order. When there's tyranny, the female archetype is to liberate from the tyranny. Whereas for the male archetype, it is the opposite. It's when there is chaos, the chaos must be conquered and order must be established. And so these play complementary roles to each other. One side is the establishment of order over chaos. The other side is the introduction to chaos into an order. The introduction of chaos into an order. And both, if they are heroic, are healthy. Sometimes order has to be established. Sometimes chaos must be introduced. When chaos is good, it is called liberation. When order is good, it's just called order. It's not called tyranny. When order is bad, it's called tyranny. Is really what I should say. And so that's one way, or a pretty key concept, that has a female and a male version, and they are complementary to each other. They're not the same, obviously, because men and women are not the same. And I think that this difference also has a sort of an evolutionary explanation to it, because if you think back to our tribal past, women really didn't stand much of a chance against male warriors in terms of brute strength and conquering and those sorts of, like, there was, if a woman had a problem with the order imposed by the tribal chieftain, they couldn't really challenge him to combat or something like that. They would have to persuade them, really, to let up. So I think the female heroic myth is always, at least Antigone and many of the other stories that fit this pattern, it's always about trying to convince a tyrannical ruler that they're wrong and that they should let up a little. So really, I think that feminism and postmodernism, to tie it into current events, is the female heroic instinct overpowering all others. I'm having a hard time finding words today. It's the overwhelming feminine instinct. It's out of balance, out of proportion again, where all norms, all tradition, all order is seen as a restrictive tyranny. And it's seen as something that has to be liberated from, and that basically all decent order in society is oppressive. Any hierarchy, for instance, is oppressive. But hierarchy is a type of healthy order when it's done in the right way. Hierarchy can be tyrannical, but it could also be a healthy order. And this is where the balance comes in between both opposing forces. One that wants to establish more order, and one that wants to restrict the order and introduce chaos. I think that these are the two forces that make men and women so complementary. So I think it's men who go out and they try to establish new things and create new systems and create new order and assert themselves upon the world. And then it's the women who prune those attempts, and they choose which ones will be able to be carried on into the future via offspring. So it's like they need each other. You can't let order flourish without a little bit of pruning, and you can't just prune everything away either. So, yep, I just arrived at work, and that's all I have to say anyway, so thank you for watching.